Hi, I'm Mitchell Ringos. Welcome to Word for Word, where we offer you an in-depth look at some of our interviews with newsmakers from across the region. You'll have the opportunity to hear word for word how they responded to the news of the day. The expert panel reviewing policing in Thunder Bay released its final report, coming with it hundreds of recommendations to improve the service. These recommendations relate to the issues of systematic racism, inclusion, officer mental health, and the need for future engagement with the Indigenous community.
Okay, and within the report, I think it was 10 action proposals, recommendations within those. Can you explain maybe what exactly does that mean? What is an action proposal and how can that be implemented by the board itself?
Yes, as you said, there are 10 action proposals. The last one of them is actually addressed to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission and the Ontario Independent Police Review Director, OIPRD, for them to monitor independently the implementation of change in Thunder Bay. Not only our action proposals, but also the recommendations that came from the Sinclair report and the OIPRD Broken Trust report and the coroner's 7 Youths Inquest report. So we felt it was important that there be independent external monitoring of change that happens here, because that was a missing piece in the previous implementation of previous reports to the board and the service. The 9 action proposals that are addressed to Thunder Bay include recommendations for the board and the chief of police to work on together, recommendations or proposals to the board for providing better, more effective, stronger, hands-on governance of policing in Thunder Bay, recommendations to the chief of police to provide strong leadership, bring systemic change in the practices of the police service, both in terms of managing its own people as well as in terms of providing services to the community.
Okay, and something else you mentioned in there, building off it, in terms of collaboration with the Indigenous community around and First Nations leaders in the region and in Thunder Bay, how important is that moving forward in terms of meeting these proposals and improving the service and the board itself?
It is absolutely critical, which is why one of our proposals is that the board establish a regular, systematic process of consulting with, taking advice from, working, developing ideas with the First Nations leadership. So at the board level, we are calling for a system where the board and the leadership of First Nations have a forum for meeting, engaging with each other on a regular basis. Not informally, not over a cup of tea or dinner, but as a regular formal process. At the chief's level, we are calling for formal agreements between Thunder Bay Police Service and the First Nations Police Services so that they actually on a daily basis work together. They exchange personnel, they learn from each other, they do work together whenever necessary. The third piece of that is that when it comes to serious incidents being investigated that involve Indigenous people, we're calling for blended teams, which would mean that Thunder Bay police officers work and benefit from the expertise of police officers from the First Nations police services. So there are a number of ways where we are saying you need to get beyond informal, one-off partnerships or collaborations and build formal structures to work together, share resources together, learn from each other, train each other, work side by side with each other. It would result in a culturally appropriate, respectful delivery of service.
Okay, my final question. I think you mentioned, you briefly talked about it in your first answer, but in terms of ensuring that these are actually put into place, these recommendations, how is the board held accountable to ensure that these are actually listened to and put into effect?
In a couple of ways. Um, our very first action proposal calls for the board's governance committee, which will be responsible for developing the policies that come from our proposals, to develop a timeline or a timetable for implementing not only our proposals but also the outstanding recommendations from the previous reports, and to create a public reporting form so that people can know what progress is being made. So, accountability in terms of setting a timetable for implementation and reporting on progress publicly regularly. And then our last proposal is for monitoring of implementation of our recommendations or proposals and past recommendations by the OCPC, Ontario Civilian Police Commission, and by OIPRD. In the Broken Trust report, OIPRD had said that it will issue regular public reports on progress by the Thunder Bay Police Service. However, it only produced one public report. We are asking it to go back to its own recommendations and do its job. With OCPC, we believe it's a good sign that OCPC has extended the term of the administrator. Even when the administrator is no longer a voting member, he will still stay on to monitor and to support implementation of change in Thunder Bay. So we are encouraged by that move by OCPC, and because this is unlike what happened last time when OCPC appointed an administrator, they left too soon without completing their job. So on behalf of the community, we are asking these two oversight agencies to stay on the job and watch and support implementation of change in Thunder Bay consistent with our proposals and previous recommendations. Another thing we would say here, our report calls on the other orders of government, the province and the federal government, to come to the table, because policing and community safety in Thunder Bay and Northwestern region cannot be left to the resources and capacity of the city of Thunder Bay or to the ad hoc funding of First Nations police services. There needs to be a new model that is sustainable, that is long term, and the two orders of government have a responsibility and a role that they must also come forward and take on.
Support continues to pour in for the Regional Food Bank following its urgent plea for help earlier this month to stock their empty shelves. The RFDA hosted a news conference at Home Hardware on Memorial. RFDA Executive Director Volker Krom says their food shelves are really starting to fill up, and he's grateful for all the support.
The Stock to Shelves campaign is a collaboration of a number of organizations. The Home Hardware is a big one. That's where we keep putting our base here for the entire month of April. We're having a food drive here, and we put the call out. We didn't have a messaging, so we went to Google Media, and they jumped on board with a really great support system, and their whole team came on board. And then we thought, well, we needed a prize, and so we started putting together our thoughts, and we're putting together a garden package, a theme, because we would like to have gardeners put in an extra row, grow, and bring produce, because we'd like to, at the end of the season, have healthy vegetables to give to our people who visit our food banks and our feeding programs. And then that brought us to the Master Gardeners and the Horticulture Society. They said we can help because they have the expertise. And so to help the community get behind this initiative, we have the non-perishable foods that are being collected here, but then looking forward to sustainability because quite frankly, we need to have a number of months. And I think it was mentioned that we are looking at 6 months ahead trying to make sure those shelves don't get depleted. And so then in time we'll have new vegetables and produce coming at the end of the summer.
All right. So people are donating cash here as well, and tell us about Home Hardware matching donations.
Well, that's really great because they are where the Home Hardware is taking donations right at the till end. They're going to match up to $5,000, which is pretty incredible for a store to take that on and be so committed to the feeding the hungry.
All right, and tell us about the garden station that you built.
Well, yes, we have some a leaf blower. We have, you got to ask, weed eater. Then we have the soil and a customized, signed, autographed garden box that I made. So, and then the garden horticulturalists and the master gardeners are providing counseling and consultation to help you with your garden. So that's really a sweet deal for a donation made here to the RFDA. So come on down to the Home Hardware and participate and put your name in the ballot.
And when will that prize be awarded?
That'll be done at the end of April. We'll pick a date. We'll come in here. We'll bring the media in to have the official draw and announcements. And then I'm not asking people to pick up the prize, but we'll come and help them with that. I think we have Home Hardware. They have the vehicles and the manpower. I think that'll be a great event.
Now, this isn't the only place where people are donating. Tell us how the overall donations around the city are coming in.
Well, it's interesting because, yes, we have a lot more coming in right at the RFDA site, but there's a number of, like St. Martin's School and Thunder Bay Library, they're all kicking in, these having little food drives around the city. So that's really making a big difference. But it is, and they're also coming to us online, which is really amazing. We've had people dropping up. So Haggy brought in a check, and everybody in the community is saying, you know, we recognize there's a need, and it's overwhelming that I find that Thunder Bay is so responsive to every time we put a call out.
It's a significant milestone in the COVID-19 pandemic. As the city of Thunder Bay has terminated its state of emergency declaration, the move comes 3 years after it first came into effect back in April of 2020, when the world still didn't know much about the coronavirus.
All right, Mayor Ken, what does this declaration mean to you?
Well, it means that the city has proven itself brave and courageous to do the right things, and that we've come out of this pandemic, I think, stronger and more community-oriented. We owe a lot of gratitude to Dr. DeMille and the health unit for their leadership, but every frontline worker in the city really rose to the occasion, and it's been quite a significant community effort.
What does this change actually mean for city employees and the like?
Well, I think there's a different way of doing business is part of it, but also it's a sense of community. I think there's a lot of bonding and people understanding what other people have to do. So when you pull together for 2 years, I think you get a different attitude toward public service, and the community, I think, is stronger for it.
How about the general public? What does this mean for them?
I believe that they appreciate the leadership that Dr. DeMille had to take in making these orders, and the people that had to execute them to make sure that we got through it safely and that no more lives were lost. And so that's a pretty hardcore mandate to succeed in.
I know you've only been mayor for the tail end of the pandemic, but what do you think the city could have done differently or better?
Well, I don't think very much that people could have done, because everybody was really, it was new to everybody. So finding ground and finding common decisions in terms of how to get through this was an exercise in community, and I think that we passed with high grades.
Just why are we allowed to rescind this order now? What's different from when we first put it in place?
Well, certainly numbers speak for themselves. Second, in terms of the community's attitude towards health and prevention, that we've really overcome what had to be done.
All right, Norma, just reiterating some of the things that Ken said, what does this declaration mean for the city of Thunder Bay?
Well, the declaration of the end of the emergency means that we're no longer in a state of emergency, but it doesn't change the reality that COVID is still here. And we have simply learned to live with COVID, and we benefit from what we have learned over the past 3 years. There are vaccines now. The workplaces are different, and people act differently as a result of COVID. So we're in a different place, but COVID remains.
Hopefully we don't see another COVID pandemic in our lifetimes, but if we did, what could the city do better or differently?
There will be another pandemic. Of that, there's no doubt. Whether it's COVID or influenza or some other virus, it's going to happen. It's happened throughout history. It's coming. There's going to be another pandemic. No one knows when. No one knows what the virus will be, but it's going to happen. So what we have learned is we've added to the playbook. There was a playbook before the COVID pandemic, and it was a planning for an influenza pandemic. So we did have pandemic plans. Of course, they didn't work out perfectly because of, what COVID was and decisions made by government and what we had to do. But we adapted. So now the playbook is thicker. We know more. We're better. When I think about workplaces, we have different workplace processes, so we'll be able to respond better when the next pandemic comes.
What was the hardest part of the past 3 years for you?
It was tough, but it was tough on everybody. Private sector, not-for-profit sector, people, families, and the people who work for the City of Thunder Bay. And I'm just really proud of the work that people did.
Another snowmobiling season is coming close to an end, as officials with Thunder Bay Adventure Trails announced on the weekend they will no longer be grooming any of their trails, and they'll also change the status of the trails to reflect the recent snowmelt.
It's April, and what we're seeing right now is the melt. I've seen that your trails are now at yellow. What does that mean exactly?
So we turned our trails from green, which is available, to yellow, which means limited. And under the limited status, that means that we do expect some possible hazards on the trails. Tops of the hills could be some bare spots. Pretty much every road that is plowed that we use through the winter will be bare, crossings and whatnot. And stumps and rocks may start showing up through the base of the trail. So really with the yellow, yellow means caution, and really be aware of what you're riding on.
Right on. And do you foresee that it's going to be open for a little bit longer, or do you think we're closing up shop soon?
It's with the warm weather in the forecast, like it's supposed to be like 13 or 14 today and double digits for the next number of days and very little frost at night. So we monitor the trails every day and have a look at a few different ones. And it's going to be sooner than later for sure, but hopefully people can get another couple of good days out of it.
And how has the season been so far? As of yet, up to this point, has it been great season, kind of a little lagging? How's it been?
It was very slow starting. We had no frost in the swamps. Creeks weren't freezing over. We were having trouble filling creeks in to get across, and a lot of snow, which was insulating the swamps and the creeks. But once we got going and we got our trails groomed, we had an excellent year this year. Our trails were better than they've been for some time. In fact, this is the first year for a number of years that we've had every kilometer of our trails open. The trails within Thunder Bay Adventure Trails, every kilometer was open this year.
Thanks for joining us for today's edition of Word for Word. We'll be back next week with more interviews from across the Northwest.